Alright, well our first project this time is making this open rose. The first thing we're going to do is to make the centre for it. And for this, because it's quite a fluffy centre, I'm using a piece of embroidery silk, which makes quite a good one actually. So what I do is, first of all I make a hook on the end of a 22 gauge wire. Then, this is all very complicated though, round my finger 4 times. Cut the silk. And of course the heavier your flower, you'll need a thicker wire. So I'm now going to push this together and I'll take my tape and I'm going to tape it so that the tape just comes over the end of it. If you remember, you take your tape and with your thumbnail squash it into the next piece by it and it's quite solid, and then you can start winding it. You only need to go a little way down there. And then we're going to take the top of it off. So we're left with some little, supposedly the stamens of it, and we'll separate them out, and that gives you your fluffy centre for your rose. Okay, that's that part of it. Now we're going to make this open rose, but to do so we really need something to hold it in so it will dry slightly. So we need a former. Now instead of going to the shops and buying a former just for this one, because it is quite bigger, or if you have something you can use, but all the better. What we're going to do is we're going to make one. And what I've got the inside of a tape roll, and I've got 4 layers of tin foil, and I'm going to lay that over there, slightly push it in, and it will actually make me a very good former for my rose petal. So that's one for the, if you have a look, you've got 2 that are facing upwards. And this one, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to make this former by pushing it in, but then we turn it upside down and slightly push it the other way. And you'll see why in a minute, just to make sure it's quite even. So we've got this shape in the end. We've got a dip in the middle and then a groove around the outside, and you'll see in a minute why we want that. So the next step is to take our rose blossom cutters, because this one we're going to make the rose with the blossom cutters again. And I want 1 petal cut with this size and then 1 with a slightly larger one. Now you can make this rose as any size you wish. I mean, if you want to make an enormous one, then obviously you need 2 bigger size ones, but at the moment, while we're learning, I think this is quite big enough. because they do become quite heavy to handle and awkward to handle, so it's better to start off with one that you can manage. So we've got our formers, we've got our cutters, now we'll roll our paste. Now it's a little warm today, so I'm going to be perhaps using a little bit more corn flour than I would normally use because it seems to be quite soft. Some days when it's cooler it's quite hard. I'm going to roll out the paste fairly thinly, but not over thinly, because I want to leave some that can make some shape. And the colour has been mixed a couple of hours ago, so it's gone right through the paste evenly. Now I can see it feels fairly thin, so and even all over. With practice you can tell whether there's any spots on your paste which are thicker than others, so you'll get used to it. I want to cut one. Now because these are quite sharp, sometimes these metal cutters, you do have a little piece of plastic that usually comes with them. If I'm making a lot, it really is essential to have that, because in the end your fingers get quite sore from cutting them. So make sure we rub the excess off the sides. Put it under a cling film to make sure it stays soft. And we want 2 of these now. Get the excess off. And another one. And so when you're making a lot of these, your fingers can get quite sore, so if you're going to use metal cutters, it's a good thing to have the piece of plastic. Right, we'll put the paste away again. Now cling film, so it'll be right to use another time. And I'm going to take the smallest one. I'm going to cut between the petals just slightly, just to make it so that it can overlap slightly when I've finished with it. My favourite tool. As I say, you can use a cocktail stick providing that it's smooth. And so you feel that cocktail stick, you'll see it's very, very rough in actual fact, so smooth it off if you're going to use one. So now we're going to go around the edges and spread it out. So this in actual will come out slightly larger than the cutter because we want it to flute out. Go right the way around it. Down every petal. You can see it's nice and wavy now. So you want to put that on your hand, or if you can't use your hand, on your working foam, and then just smooth out the centre to give it a slight hollow. And then remembering we've got quite a big stain going through, centre going through that, so you need to make a hole with preferably a cocktail stick so it goes right through. You've got enough room, and it will be big enough to take your, if you see, it will be big enough to take your centre. And I'm going to use this former to put this in, because I want it that centre one to be quite a small shape. And then we're going to do these, we're going to cut them down. And again we're going to roll the edges so that they're wavy. And this one we're going to use one of our forms we made. The reason why I don't assemble them immediately is that it's nice to get them to stay in this fluted shape for a little while before you try to assemble them. But you really don't want to get them too dry, because then they won't fit together. So I usually leave them for about 20 minutes before I assemble them so that the actual petals stay in place. I'm going to put my hole through the middle again, and we're going to use this former for this one. So that's that shape. Make sure it's nice and fluted. And then the last one, again we'll cut it down a little bit so there's room for it to move over each. The petals can move over each other then when you put them in the formers if you wish. And we're going around this one, exactly the same. Don't take very long to do. These are great roses because they look quite spectacular on a cake and they are fairly quick to make. They're nearly round. Now with this one, it's going to do slightly different. This is what we made this really funny shape former for. What I'm going to do is then, it's slightly pointing upwards at this point, I'm going to turn it over. And I'm going to use my ball tool to hollow out the centre there. And then I'm going to put it on there so that it's got a slight hollow, but the petals are actually falling downwards. If I show you one here, you can see now that these two rows of petals are pointing upwards and the last row is pointing downwards. I've made ones not so long ago and they're still soft, but they're formed better. And what I'm going to do is, the next stage is to mount them onto the centre, so I want a little bit of glue. Now the bigger you get with these, the more difficult it would be just to stick them together, so you might have to hold them together with a little icing sugar. For that one. I'm going to take that and put some glue in the centre. And mount that together like that, without pulling it through. I think these have been left quite long enough. Now, I've got 3 here that I've dried. I don't actually like them to dry as much as this, but these are a little too soft to use now, so at the moment we're going to use, I'll show you how to use these, but really you get a more natural form if you actually do them when they're slightly soft. They need to be hard enough to form, but just slightly more firmer. So what I'm going to do is because these have been left to dry, so I'm going to put some glue on there. Okay, and put that one on. And then with this one, put some glue in there. As I say, if they get any heavier, you really want to put a little bit of icing sugar between them. That's the 2 mounted together. And then the 3rd one, again a little glue around the centre. And now you can see why the bigger hole was left, so that you can get that through properly. And then at that stage, you need to hang them upside down to dry. So I'm going to hang them on the frame there. The next stage is to make the bud, which you've actually seen me make before, which we did exactly the same bud in the wild rose section, but I'll quickly show you how to do that one. So I want quite a large pea shape. That's not quite as big as that. Bring it out and then shape it to a nice D shape. Flatten the base a little. Smooth the edges. And we take a wire and form a hook. Little glue on the hook, and then a little glue along the paste up the side. Roll it round, pinch the base a bit so the wire doesn't come out, and then finish off the bottom very smoothly so that you can get the calyx over it. You've got a nice roll in there. We can hang that one up. Next stage is to put the calyx on our rose. Now to do this we are going to use this one, and it's roughly the same size as the inner petal, so you can see they're both about the same size. Gives you a rough guide as to how big you need the calyx to be. least. I say it's very warm in here today, and I'm going to cut one. Make sure it's clear. Put that in there because I'm going to use it in a minute for making the leaf. That first calyx there. I'm going to get my knife and I'm going to cut into the side of that calyx, just a little tiny cut on each one. And then I'm going to get the bud, which I'm going to thread through, and I want a little glue. Put it over like that and stick it up the sides. And now I want a little seed pod. On the base. Which I will thread through with a little glue. And then shape it. So it's got a little point near the stem. And the second one I should do exactly the same. Cut into each one. If you have a look at a rose, you'll see that each calyx arm is not just one piece. That's that. And you would really let your rose dry a little more before you mounted it on. So a little glue. And we're going to put it on to the rose, and then a little roll of paste to make the calyx seed pod. A little glue. Now I've done it like this because depending on how you're going to use them, because if you're going to use a lot of them and they're in a bunch together, you'll find that it's very easy to break off the calyx. But I'll show you one that you perhaps do if you were only using one rose, because that is how the calyx really looks. It's by the time the rose has opened fully, the calyx curls back, and when the bud is opening like this, the calyx curls outwards. But as you can see, if you've only got one rose or two roses on a display, then fair enough, you can be very careful with it and you wouldn't break it. But you can see that if you use a quantity of these roses, the chances are these little points would get knocked off. So if I'm going to do several on a cake, I usually do it like that. I'm going to show you now how to do the leaves. Now the last lot of leaves I did, I actually did them with a metal cutter and a veiner. But this time I'm going to make them with this plunger cutter, which I expect a lot of you would get because they seem to be more popular nowadays. There is a problem with them, but I'll show you in a minute what I mean. So first of all, we'll cut the leaf out. I'll take it out of the thing, out of the paper. You cut the leaf out and then press the plunger down and it will leave you a leaf with a vein on it, which is very pretty. It's very delicate and very pretty. But there is a problem because you've made an indentation along the centre with it. It's very difficult to get the wire in. So what you do is the wire, your thin wire, it is actually best to run it beside that vein, because if you've got a fine leaf, you'll find that it will come through. So just beside it. I mean, nobody would really know it was beside it, but and that's the leaf. You turn it over a little so the wire doesn't come out, and then you can make it the shape you wish. So we've got all our parts now. I've shown you how to make the parts. Now I'm going to take some made up roses and show you how to put them together. Now the one thing you can do, if you have a look at these roses here, you'll see that the centre is slightly shaded, and you'll find that if you look at an open rose, it will be slightly shaded in the centre. So the best way you can do that is to use a little petal dust. And the petal dust that I've diluted down here with a little corn flour so that it's not so harsh. So all you do is just get a little of the petal dust and brush the centre. If you feel that is not strong enough, then you can use it straight from the file, which it comes in a file like that. But I think, and then when you've put the petal dust in, you can, and shaded it, you can then steam it. Remember, I showed you how to do the steaming very quickly over the steam. That's just gently shaded in there. And if you want to shade the edge of your leaves, you can do. Just make them slightly darker. So now we have 3 roses. I have 2 buds, and I'm going to have 2 sets of 5 leaves, and this is going to be, put these together. Again, remember you squash your tape up and then turn it. And these have been done, and we want one higher than the others and the others slightly down to each side. Don't tape it too near, otherwise you won't have any movement in your leaf. So leave some stem there. Just a little tape. and then another one, as I say, leave some stem there. Frequent mistake is putting the stem too near the leaf, too near the main stem, and you don't get any room to arrange them properly. So we've got the leaves there. So we're going to start off by taking our main leaf there, and we're going to put, I need a little tape on there because it's not going to stay. You can go far because it's already green. The wire's already is green in colour, so just a little way. That's just to hold it steady while I make the arrangement. They'll stay together, hopefully. And one a little higher than the other. So this one is coming to the base of that leaf, and that one about halfway down it. And you can always get your petal dust and shade your leaves as you wish. Or if it depends what cake it's going on, because sometimes if you've got a christening cake you don't want too much colour. They want to be delicate, or even on a wedding cake, so it depends what you're making. So now a little tape on the roses, just so they hold steady while I'm putting it together. Very pretty rose. I mean, these can be made any size that you wish, because you actually don't need many on a cake to make a nice arrangement. So we're going to put one of our roses to the side, and my rose has come roughly to the base of that bud. Just a little bit over it. And the next one beside it. And I'm going to add my other leaf to the back of that. So, top of that leaf is roughly in line with the bud. And then the final rose at the base, in between the other two. Oh, perhaps a little lower. Let me have it a little lower than that. Trim that little bit off, and I'm going to wrap the base again with it with tape. And now we can arrange the leaves so that they come to the side. They can all be in a line, they can be just slightly offset. And then you've got another arrangement. You can see them both there. It's very pretty.